Anything you want to do, I'll be on it too. Everything you say is like a gold with a view. Business in the front with a party in the back. Or was it me or was that outfit really whack? This kind of thing doesn't happen usually. I'm on the opposite side of it, truthfully. I know you want it, so come and get it. Biatches, I'm out. Good afternoon. And for those of you who don't already know, I'm going to be bringing a little bit of information about rap music and hip-hop culture and its influence on our nation's youth. We're going to be talking a few things today. Where did hip-hop start, geographically speaking? And also, why was it a result? How was it a result? There are some major elements that define hip-hop culture. And of course, there are stereotypes and influences, both positive and negative, we're going to touch on today. Some really interesting data and research that I found. And if you listen carefully, at the end of the presentation this afternoon, we're going to conduct a little experiment in this classroom to see just how submerged in hip-hop culture we already are. So let's get started. You can see by my visual picture up here, we have some elements of hip-hop culture today. Rap music is defined by the Institute of Inner City Education, founded in New York City, as an art form. It was made popular by urban youth by the use of rhyming lyrics partnered with a consistent beat and rhythm. Hip-hop was a subculture of that urban youth and heavily influenced by African Americans and inner city residents. According to New York University research psychologist, Dr. Grant Bryden, hip-hop started somewhere between Washington Heights in the late 60s and 70s through to the Bronx and the projects inside New York City during the 80s. And it came as a result of some interesting and social reconstruction, interesting and dramatic social reconstruction through the 1980s. As a response, they claimed that hip-hop culture brought communities together. Some of his findings, and it would also agree with hip-hop culture, that there are four major cornerstones that create hip-hop. One being the elements, one being rap music itself, also hip-hop, also beatboxing, using the teeth, the tongue, the mouth, the lips, the breathing of the air, and manipulating your sound to sound like a synthesized computer. There's also breakdancing. There's graffiti, which is a visual illustration of inner city expression. And DJing, the actual vinyl records that get the air sound, all considered cornerstones of inner city self-expression. Dr. Bryden concluded some of his research. He said the significance of graffiti, breakdancing, DJing, hip-hop music, DJing and rapping to the hip-hop culture is tremendous. It was these elements that served as cornerstones of inner city self-expression. It is interesting to note that as with any art form that takes risks, there can oftentimes be undesirable effects. Many of the stereotypes that we are familiar with, rap music and hip-hop culture being grotesque, objectifying women, using abusive language, socially unacceptable language. Dr. Stephen Martino, another English professor and researcher out of New York University, he produced, Dr. Stephen Martino out of New York University, who led the United States study of hip-hop culture on today's youth, published in the latest edition of the Pediatrics Journal. He talked about his findings discovered an encouragement of insubordination or defiance, talked about an aggressive sexual nature that's oftentimes found and considered disgusting inside rap music. He talks about it in an interesting way, considering his data was published in a pediatrics journal. His demographic and his sample size that he took the information from was between the ages of 12 and 17. A specific quote that he gave. It may be that girls who are repeatedly exposed to these messages expect to take a submissive role in their sexual relationships or to be treated with disrespect by their partners. He also talked about violence in lyrics, and actually as a visual representation, what I have for you here today is some of his data findings. Some of his data found that the majority of rap lyrics, when they talked about violence, were talking about violence with a weapon. Kind of an interesting correlation to our nation's troubled youth today. But what about the positive effects? What about positive influences? Dr. Constance Chapman is a professor at New York University, also a research scientist. She discovered that there was an empowerment behind hip-hop culture, and it brought a community together. She also observed it as being hip-hop was being an instructional tool. As a personal example, I can tell you that when I was a child, it was important to my parents to know the 66 books of the Bible. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Old Testament, it's very long, so I used the popular Vanilla Ice rhythm and created my own lyrics. That I'm going to go blank on right now. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Pause for a
Yep.
second.